Welcome to your third and final video in which we will take a look at the assessments provided in the secondary math curriculum for this year. Now, first of all, we have the common formative assessments just like we did last year. They will be very similar but updated just a little bit based on last year's feedback. We will have some review questions available this year. These are TEKS based and very targeted to exactly what we believe is expected of 6th grade math students. And some summative assessment questions also very TEKS based and formatted to be very much like what students will be expected to do at the end of the year. So let's take a look at a CFA. This is CFA 1, and remember the whole idea behind the CFAs is that we find where students are confused and making mistakes before we get to the end of the unit so that we can help them correct those misunderstandings and hopefully understand everything by the time they get to that summative assessment. In order to do that, we need to not only ask them questions, but we need to get an idea of what they're thinking when they answer. And this first question is a great example of that. We ask students which point represents the value of the absolute value of -2, but then we ask them to explain why. So if a student gives an incorrect answer, when they answer the because part, that's going to help us know how to help them understand that the correct answer is actually S. Another good example is question 3. Which name below best describes the classification for the following number set? If a student says whole numbers, then we know we need to talk to them about that -8. If they say rational numbers, then while that is true, they are all rational numbers, that's not the very best description. And maybe they're confused by the 25/5. Or maybe they don't understand that we need the most specific name possible. So that would be why the answer would be integers. So this is the kind of thing that we hope will give us a lot of good information so that we can be helping our students along the way before we ever get to a summative assessment. Now let's look at a review. We've had some teachers working very hard this summer to create these reviews and summative assessment questions for you. And what you'll find on the review is that they are grouped by TEKS. So on this first section, 6.2c, students are asked to write the integer to represent the real world situation. And you can see how this would be very closely related to that activity that I showed you before with altitude, right? Here, we are asking students to place points on number lines. Notice the number lines are different because these are the different things that we have discovered are expected of 6th grade math students. Now we're back to 6.2c, and while we before wrote an integer based on a real world situation, now we are trying to put those integers on number lines. So this is the format that you will find for all of the reviews as you go through. They're grouped by TEKS, and each different section might ask a different part of that TEKS or ask about a different part of that TEKS, so that hopefully by the time we get to the end of the review, students have thoroughly covered all of the different TEKS in the unit. It looks like we have a little spacing issue here. That kind of thing will come up. If you see something like that, just shoot us an email so we can correct it. Now you'll see this particular review has 31 questions, and obviously that's too much to expect of a student all in one day. So you might want to break this up and assign some of it a little bit earlier in the unit and kind of use it to sort of just spiral even through the second half of the unit, or however you want to do it. It's entirely up to you. We've just provided a really rich bank of 31 questions for you to use to review however you see to be the most appropriate for your students. And then this is a test that, again, teachers have been working hard on this summer. These are all going to be multiple choice and griddable. We do note that there will be some new question types coming up on START in a few years, and we'll begin sort of integrating them next year. But for this current school year, we are sticking with multiple choice and griddables. Now at the end of the test, you'll find not only the answers, but you'll also be able to see which TEKS is being assessed on each question. And I will talk more in a few minutes about how we determined exactly what to put on the test. But the last thing I want to say here is you notice there are 13 questions. I think most of us prefer closer to 20 questions on a unit assessment. So this gives you room to include 7 more questions that maybe are from your existing unit test. These are the 7 best questions from that unit test, so I'm going to add them in. Or maybe you teach a pre-AP class, and we have a pre-AP version of the test with a few more, slightly more rigorous questions for pre-AP students, and so then you can add some more of those on your pre-AP test. There's room for you to make the test your own. But we have started with a set of 13 very well targeted questions that we know will be a really good predictor for how well students truly understand each of these TEKS. We know that teachers are constantly making changes and improvements to their curriculum based on new learning and new understanding and so forth. But we also know you don't have enough time to change everything that you might want to change. Some teachers are using test questions that were written back when the TEKS were new, or using questions from the McGraw-Hill resources that were also written when the TEKS were brand new. And we know a lot more now. So what we've tried to do is give you a good start on revising your assessments based on the knowledge that we have today, to make even better assessments, to make sure our students are even better prepared for STAR at the end of the year. So that is our summative assessment. Like I said, I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about how we created the assessment, what the composition of the assessment was. So let's take a quick look. This particular test breakdown happens to be 8th grade, but the same process was followed in 6th grade. And what we have done is, again, very carefully studied the TEKS, and we've studied the Release STAR test to determine how frequently each TEKS was assessed and all of the different ways that the TEKS was assessed. Unfortunately, that is our reality. We are tasked with teaching all of these TEKS, but at the end of the year, when our students have to prove their knowledge, they have to do it through the STAR test. And so we want to make sure that we have covered everything in a way that will best prepare students to prove their knowledge. So that's what this document was intended to help us with. We can see that there's one readiness TEKS in this unit, so we know we need several questions over the readiness TEKS. And in this case, each of the supporting TEKS have been asked 4 times out of 5 years. So apparently the state considers all of these to be quite important as well. Well, that gives us some good information. So when we make an assessment, while we want to have more questions over the readiness TEKS than anything else, we also need to have plenty of questions on the supporting TEKS. And in this case, they're pretty evenly split among all 3 of those supporting TEKS. So that's the frequency. But then we also looked at how the questions were asked. Most of us have probably had an experience in which we know that our students understand a concept. They could answer questions about it all day long and do a great job. And then when we get to STAR, it is asked in such a way that we would have never thought of. And our students don't understand what they're even talking about. And that's so frustrating. So we've tried to minimize that as much as possible by looking at how they do ask the questions to make sure that our students are not surprised by that and that they can answer and prove that they do understand the topic at hand. So, with all of that in mind and the frequency in mind, if we need 5 questions over 8.7c, then what should those 5 questions look like? And that's what we have here. And this was done for every unit and every course, so that as teachers helped us with writing those assessments, we could make sure that we are thoroughly covering each of the TEKS in the way that it needs to be covered, so that, like I said a minute ago, the unit assessment would be a very good predictor of how that student will perform on those TEKS on the STAR exam at the end of the year. Now, I tell you all of this so that you will know how much you can trust these documents. These are not thrown together and things are not pulled out of thin air. If there's a griddable question on your unit assessment, that means that TEKS has been assessed through a griddable on STAR. All right, we've really made sure that these are very well aligned, that they fully cover the TEKS, and that they cover the TEKS in a way that students will be asked at the end of the year. So like I said before, your students' performance on these unit assessments should be a very good predictor of how well your students will prove their knowledge on STAR at the end of the year. So I hope that you can really rely on these summative assessments and incorporate your existing questions with these new questions to make some really strong assessments for your students. I would like to finish up today by reminding you of the Math Department mission statement. Kristen and I are here to support teachers as they promote academic achievement and empower students to excel in math. We will accomplish this through an aligned curriculum, instructional best practices, and data-driven assessment. Kristen and I are here to help you in any way that we can. If you have trouble opening anything in the curriculum or understanding anything in the curriculum, or if there's anything else we can help you with, please let us know. Here's our contact information, and like I said, our whole job is to support you so that you and your students can have the very best year possible. Thank you for all of your time today. I do really appreciate you, and have a wonderful beginning to your 2020-2021 school year.